Hi, welcome to the part 4 of this video series. We are covering Azure DP900 Data Fundamentals real exam questions in the series. In this video, we will look at some more questions, but before that, please subscribe my channel and like my videos. Please drop in your comments if you have any constructive feedback. Now let's move to the questions. So we have to map the activity types with the Azure Data Factory activities. So these are the activity types and these are the activities. So we have to do the mapping. So if we talk about copy, so from these three, which one is more relevant for copy? I think data movement is more relevant for copy because copy means you are moving the data from one place to the other. Now let's look at mapping data flow. So if you are coming from a ETL background, you must be already knowing what you do in the mapping. As a part of the mapping exercise, what we do is we do a source to target mapping and we apply a series of transformations in that layer. Hence, data transformation is more relevant for mapping data flows. And let's go to until. Until is obviously control because it is telling you at which point what is the control levels, at which point you have to stop processing or till when you have to process the data. So this is how the final answer looks like. Now let's move to the next question. So here we are expected to provide a service which is used to orchestrate the pipeline. Now if we scan through the options, we see integration runtime, which is providing the compute for processing, and this doesn't help you with orchestration. Link services, these are your data sources, whether if you're trying to link the source and the destination, this is how you do it, but it is not used to orchestrate the pipeline. Now data set is just a set of data. It will not help you orchestrate the pipeline. Control flow is the right option in this case. So control flow is the final option answer here. Let's see this next question. For each of these options, we have to mark whether this is true or false or yes or no. So let's look at the first one. BI dashboard is not associated with a single workspace. This should be no. Let's look at the second one. It says a BI dashboard can only display visualizations from a single data set. This is no. You can display data from multiple data sets. Similarly, you can display data from multiple workspaces. The third one, the BI dashboard can display visualizations from a Microsoft Excel workbook, which is correct. You can use the Excel workbook as a source, similar to how you connect to a database and create data and create reports for the data coming from those databases. Similar to that, you can also do it for Excel sheets. You can use Excel sheets as your data sources. So the answer is yes. I got this question in my exam, so you can prepare this. Now let's look at this question. So we have three options and we have to mark yes and no. So the first one says Azure Databricks is Apache Spark-based collaborative analytics platform, which is true. It's a Spark-based platform. There are two Spark-based platforms, SG Insight and Databricks. So this is correct. The second one says Azure Analysis Services is used for transactional workloads. This is wrong. Analysis Services is used for data modeling. It is not used for transactional workloads, so this should be no. And the third one says Azure Data Factory orchestrates data integration workflows. Yes, this is right because it is used for data integration across, and you can orchestrate the workflows, you can orchestrate the activities, etc. using Data Factory. So these are the right answers. Now we have to mark yes and no for each of these options. The first one says processing salary payments once a month is example of batch workload, which is wrong. This is this is correct. Once a month is a batch workload. So in most of the projects you must have seen in the real life, what happens is, suppose there is a payroll system. Now once a month the payroll is getting processed. So this is similar to that. It's the salary payment system which is processed once a month. So 30th of every month you get your salary from your companies, and that is when the batch is getting processed. So it is example of batch workload. Now, the second one says a wind turbine that sends 50 sensor readings per second is an example of streaming workload. So what this means is this is a real-time data that is flowing in from the sensors, and it is flowing per second. And this is true. This is a streaming workload because this is a real-time workload. Now let's inspect the third one. So a home electricity meter that sends reading once a day. It's an example of streaming workload. This is no, because what happens is it is sending a reading once a day because whole day there are movements in the readings, and once a day it just tracks and sends that okay, the final reading is this much. And then streaming workload is for real time. This may not necessarily be a real time stuff because there is a point in time, suppose 9 a.m. or 9 p.m. at night, when the meter reading is collected and sent across. Even if the meter is moving ahead, it doesn't matter because at 9 p.m. it took a snapshot of that reading. Whether it sends it by 9.02 p.m. or 9.05 p.m. or 11 p.m. or at night 1 a.m. it doesn't really matter because there is no need to send this data real time. This probably you can wait, you can afford a latency here. So this answer should be no in this case. So these are our three answers. Now let's look at this question. So you have to complete the sentence. Batch workloads. If you analyze these options, so does it process data in memory row by row? Doesn't look so. Does it collect and process data at most once a day? So batch workloads can process the data multiple times a day. It is not that it only works for once a day. You can also do it on an hourly basis. You can do it twice a day, 4 times a day, 5 times a day. So this is wrong. Then the batch workload processes data as new data is received in near real time. This is wrong because batch workloads, they have high latency because they are neither real time nor near real time. So this is also wrong. Fourth says the collect the data and then process the data when a condition is met. That is right, exactly right, because that's what batch workloads are meant for. It keeps on collecting the data. Suppose you're asking someone to send the data every every 8 hours. So for suppose this batch starts at 9 a.m. so every 8 hours, that means 5 p.m. so between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. it will keep collecting the data and send the entire set of data in a batch when the condition is met. And what is the condition? The condition is that the data should be sent every 8 hours. So the moment that 8 hours is completed, the condition is met and the data is sent. The collected data that was there, it is sent across. Now the first option, process data in memory row by row. So processing data in memory is an example of cluster based processing, something which Databricks or HD Insights on a big data cluster does, and that is not something which is precisely a property of batch workloads. So this is our answer and we'll lock our answer. Let's move to the next question. Now this is an easy one. Whenever you see Cosmos DB Gremlin, so Gremlin is always about graph database. So the resource type, the container resource type is graph. It cannot be table, partition key, or document because Gremlin is always graph. So the keywords here are which you should remember: Gremlin, graph, nodes type structure, edges and nodes, relationships between edges and nodes, These are all properties of Gremlin and Graph databases. Now, why do you use such databases? Like I explained in my earlier videos, suppose you are going to a shopping website, Amazon.com, for example, and the moment you buy a product, suppose a pen, and you have done the financial transaction, it prompts you giving some recommendations that people who bought a pen, they also went ahead and purchased these notebooks or these files, etc. So that is done by using a node and a edge relationship, and this is a property of a graph database. So here goes our answer. Let's move to the next question. Now here again you have to mark either yes or no for each of these options. So the first one says, when you're trying to ingest data from data lake storage across regions, you will incur costs for bandwidth. Obviously yes, this is a no-brainer because you have a data lake storage in one region, for example, North USA, and you are trying to access it from a different region like London or Singapore, then you will attract network costs, and that is what it is referring to by bandwidth. So this option would be yes. Let's look at the second option. You can use blob, table and file storage in the same Azure storage account. Yes, so you can create one storage account and you can use any of these storage types. So this should be yes. The third one says you implement Azure data lake storage by creating an Azure storage account. This is also yes, because unless you have created a storage account, you cannot use a particular storage type like blob, data lake, table, files, etc. So this is also yes. So these are our final answers. Now here is the question where you need to do a matching. So you have to, in the real exam, you have to drag something from the left hand side and drop it on the right hand side. This is how it appears in the exam as well. So if you see these options, the first one says prevent access to Azure SQL database from another network. If you want to prevent access from another network, then firewall is the tool that you have to use, or it's a service, because what you actually do is you have a set of IPs and you can tell the firewall to block those IPs or grant access. So if you want to prevent access, then you can put those IPs, you can blacklist them in your firewall, and it will prevent access to the SQL database from another network. So firewall would go in here. The second one says support Azure AD sign-ins to an Azure SQL database. So Azure AD is used for authentication, because what happens is, suppose you have an application and for something, for example Cognos or an RTC, something of that sort, and then you are prompted for entering username and password. Now when you do that, it goes to your authentication and authorization services, which is Active Directory. In the older environments, or on-premises environments, we also use LDAP. So something of that sort. So it goes to Active Directory and tries to authenticate if this user is a valid user, and the IDs have not expired and so on. So hence in this case authentication would map to second option. So the third one says ensure sensitive data never appears as plain text in an Azure SQL database. What it means is this is a use case for encryption, because they don't want you to see any data. That's why they don't want it in a plain text so that people can read and interpret the data. So they want it encrypted. Now at the database level you have a feature called encryption at rest. So that way all your data while it resides in the storage is encrypted. So you can use AES 256 protocols or transparent data encryption for encrypting data at rest. So encryption would map to option 3. So this is our final answer. And now let's look at the next question. If you see here, you have multiple statements and we need to mark yes or no. So similar questions, the format is exactly the same in the real certification exam. So this is the question which I got in my exam. So the answers here. So one key thing that you have to remember is this is a very good question which gives you a differentiation between a table storage and a Cosmos DB table API. So the key difference here is Cosmos DB, it would support both read and write, okay, and it supports multiple write regions, but table storage doesn't support multiple write regions. It only supports multiple read replicas, but it does not support multiple write regions. So this is our answer. Let's move on. Again, this is a question which I got in my exam, exactly the same question. So you have to map, and when you try to map this, if you have application users and their default language, so what you basically do here is this is an example of key value, because users are your keys, the language are your values. So the key value would map here. Now medical images and their associated metadata. So when you talk about image files and metadata, this is a property of object store. In object store you always have data files and metadata. Now the files can be anything. It can be data file, it can be an image, it can be a parquet file, and etc. It can be anything, but this is a property of object store. The third one says employee data that shows relationship between employees. So this is an example of graph, like I explained in my previous few question, that it's graph database or Gremlin API. It relies on a node and edge structure, and this is primarily used to define tight relationships between components and objects. So something of that sort. If you go to Amazon and you buy one thing and you get recommendations to buy other, such sort of recommendations comes in from a graph or a Gremlin API. So a graph database or graph data store would suffice the purpose for this one. So here goes our final answer. It's the best hodgepodge. So graph maps to this one, key value maps to first one, and object maps to the second one. So this brings us to the end of part 4 of this video series. Please subscribe to my channel It keeps me motivated to put in more and more contents, which will help you get through your certification exams successfully.